Welcome to the Indie Writer Podcast, where we talk about all things writing and indie publishing. Today we are excited to be talking about writing complex villains with JF Dubeau and Anna Mocikat. Anna Mocikat is the award-winning, internationally published author of Behind Blue Eyes, the Tales of the Shadow City series, and the MUC series. Before becoming a novelist, she graduated from film school and worked as a screenwriter and game writer for over a decade. Anna lives in Greenville, South Carolina. JF Dubeau is a writer of science fiction and paranormal horror. His debut novel, The Life Engineered, was chosen for the Sword and Laser collection on Inkshares. His second book, A God in the Shed, was chosen as part of the top 20 horror novels of 2017 on Goodreads and has been optioned for television, to be produced by Akiva Goldman. He's also the writer of the Achewillow podcast, a cozy horror fiction podcast. Song of the Sandman, the sequel to A God in the Shed, is to be released in October of 2021.
So I'm so glad you're both here. To start, I'd just love for both of you to share your experience with writing villains and where your love of crafting villains comes from. Anna, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So why do I love villains? Because nobody loves them otherwise, and everybody needs some love, even villain. I don't know. I just enjoy writing them very much, and I think that's something I'm pretty good at least that's what I've been told. So you see my villain walking in the back, that's Yuri, and I had the fantastic idea to name my dog after one of my villains in one of my books. Her name is Eurydice, and readers really like her, and I had the fantastic idea to name my dog like that, and that she behaves like a villain now. So it was really a crappy idea. I will never do that again. But anyway, so I love diving into the dark side of humans, and I really enjoy discovering why villains are as they are. And I also believe that an antagonist almost as important for the story as the protagonist. So it's very important to really work on them and make them believable. So I think it's in general important, and it's particularly important for me. And my best villain is in my Behind Blue Eyes series. His name is Metatron, and he turned out so well that he is the second favorite character of readers of this book, and he comes before the main character. So I think I did a good job with him, and I really love him. But yeah.
How about you, JF? Where did your love of villains come from?
I like villains because I like to think that if the relationship between an antagonist and a protagonist were a dance, the villain or the antagonist is really the one leading the dance, always choosing where the movements are, where the story goes, and having all that. I'm not good at dancing, so my analogy is falling apart as I'm telling it. But I think you can understand what I mean. Like the villain is the one who really sort of drives the action, and the hero sort of follows along with it. So villains they're not just important, but they also become very interesting. And a good villain, much like a good dancer, will have the quote unquote fluid movement to make it seem like the hero or the follower has equal say in the decision. Like it becomes seamless who's leading the motion and who's not. But in the back of the writer's mind and in the back of the reader's mind, it's clear who's actually like leading everything. It's always the villain.
That's awesome. That's an awesome explanation for a villain. Fantastic. I absolutely agree 100%. It really should, in a good story, it should be a dance. Absolutely. Great.
Could you tell us about some of your favorite complex villains? We heard, Anna, a little bit about the ones in your own work, but maybe in other people's work too. Who are some of your favorites?
So my all-time favorite villain, it's maybe pretty cliche, but is and always will be Darth Vader. This guy scared the crap out of me when I was a kid and watched the movie for the first time. I don't know, I was maybe 6 or something like that. So yeah, he gave me nightmares. But That was basically when my love for villains was born, because I was so fascinated by this character. So that definitely is a fantastic villain. From more recent stuff, I don't know if any of you ever watched The Boys, the TV show The Boys. I think it's a fantastic show. I love it. It's great. But there is the villain there. His name is Homelander. He pretends to be a superhero, but in truth is a super villain. And I absolutely love this character. I love how the authors have created him. It's so good. It's really a villain with so much depth. You hate him and you love him at the same time. So this is for me a prime example of really good writing.
Yeah, what about you, JF?
I think one of my favorite villains, at least from recent years, is the two characters in the movie, the Denis Villeneuve movie, Blade Runner 2049. The main villain, so to speak, played by Jared Leto, Neander Wallace, is villainous in very classical, very three-piece suit businessman kind of way. And his henchman Love, which is one of his replicants, is more of a direct, violent henchman villain. But what I like about this villain and the dynamic that's crafted, and one thing that's very interesting when you watch the movie, is you realize that the bad guy, the villain, Neander Wallace, never meets the main character, the hero played by Ryan Gosling, Kay. They never interact. They never meet face to face. They're barely aware of one another. And yet every time one of them does something, it has a direct or indirect impact on the other and the dynamic between them. And as far as I'm concerned, that is such a brilliant way of playing with the hero-villain relationship. And Jared Leto can be uneven as an actor, but he has such a way of portraying that character in a detached, cold manner that makes everything that the character does believable.
So that's an awesome villain, and I think it's a very interesting thing what you say, that they never meet, but they are still. I mean, he's the antagonist basically. The chick is just like the henchman, but the Wallace is the antagonist in the movie, and they never meet. So, and it's still working really well. So I think that's a very good example, very good villain writing actually.
When you're crafting your stories as two people who love writing villains, what comes to you first? Does your villain come to you first, or does your antagonist come? And then how do you make sure that they're foils for each other? And how do you start to kind of flesh out those characteristics within each?
I have this weakness where I have a lot of difficulty crafting one without the other, seeing as the way I try to build my stories is very dependent on the characters and their journey. And obviously one, like an antagonist and protagonist journey, are tied together. So it's very difficult to not have to come up with one and then try to patch in the other one. This becomes even more complicated if you have like multiple antagonists, multiple characters that can qualify as a protagonist. But all in all, if I'm trying to look at like the general arc of the entire story, I come up with the arc first, and then the villain and the hero that need to fit that arc kind of just fall into place, if that makes any sense.
So for me, I really the villains are almost more important for me than the protagonists. In Shadow City, the villain is even on the cover, so the cover is very it's a very strong cover, and there is this woman on the cover, and everybody thinks that's the hero of the story, but no, when you read it you will realize no, that's actually the villain. However, what is very important for me is that they have a variety of different traits and a variety of different characteristics. They're not just evil. So as much as I like Darth Vader, but he's pure evil, right? So he's an extremely archetypical bad guy. He redeems himself at the end, but he still is like the boogeyman basically. But so what I prefer is to make them a little bit more human. And with Behind Blue Eyes, which is probably my best book, my best story, I have designed this story as a story of the protagonist and the villain. They are both like hero and anti-hero of the story. So it's not so clear in the first book, but becomes clear in the second book that it's a story of two people actually. And for me, the goal was to make readers love the villain of the story. So he is the bad guy. He does horrible things. He is sadistic. He is ruthless and whatnot. But you still can't different but really like him. And I hear it from so many people who say like how much they like this character, and also say, oh my God, he's so right with what he's saying. And that's why I say, okay, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted him to pull you over to the dark side. So Darth Vader is pretty bad at pulling people to the dark side because he's like too evil. Whereas Metatron, I created him so he is really able to do that, and he is tickling the dark side in every one of us, and the desire to live this dark side we have.
Yeah, I love that, Anna. That's my favorite kind of villain. I was thinking when we were talking about our favorite villains of White Rose from Mr. Robot, and how like you're never even really sure if she's the villain or not, like until very late in the series. And then I was thinking about a tweet that I saw about how like Magneto from X-Men, we haven't really talked about books. We've been talking about a lot of movies and TV shows. The tweet said something about like Magneto kind of became an anti-hero because people started to realize that he was right, like with how politics are going in the real world. And so I was going to ask, because I love how you can draw people to the dark side. I love that idea you're talking about. But how do you like still kind of make it clear that that's the villain? You know, like how do you not just have it come across as like a conflict of interest? I'm wondering if you have some maybe like craft tips for how to make somebody so relatable, but still have it be clearly somebody's right.
So yeah, there are definitely craft aspects to that, and there are things everybody can use easily. So let's start with like if you want to have a villain who is clearly super evil, everybody will hate this villain, and you want to establish this is definitely a horrible person. So the easiest way, and you can't redeem this person after that ever again. That's a villain you will never redeem. If you want that, the easiest way is you let this villain either hurt a child or kill an animal, ideally a dog. If you introduce a villain who kills a dog, you will never get the audience back to this person. So this is the easiest trick. Maybe hurting children is too much for most of us, but you can have the villain hurt an animal. Most people love dogs. You can also pick a cat. A hamster would be probably not enough, but or a horse also works. You let the villain torture or kill an animal, and you have the ultimate bad guy. Nobody will ever like him ever again. So this is one thing you can use. Another thing is if you want a villain people like, that's of course more tricky to achieve. So what I do with Metatron is he says many things similar to Magneto actually. He has a very good reason why he is who he is, and that it's something always worth bringing in when you write a villain is give them a backstory that made them like this and made them who they are, but not necessarily the victim thing, because that's a little bit like, you know, we have seen that a million times, like, I don't know, a person has been abused as a child and now is a psychopath. That's like, give them a little bit of a more unique story, but give them a backstory that led them to be what they are. Then, so in my case, I have him do clearly horrible things. He's really very sadistic. That's something about him. But on the other hand, he is extremely sophisticated and very, very intelligent. So you begin thinking, oh, maybe he's right about what he's saying, and maybe the means he's using are necessary. So this is how you can tickle that in a little bit. And in the end, you can also have a shocker in the end where you show who this person really is, and really have your audience, your readers, be like, oh shit, and I really like this guy. Oh, okay. So I totally fell for this. This is something you can play with a lot, I think. But what helps is giving them a good backstory, and the more work you put into that in advance, the easier it will be for you to write the villain later.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Anna's saying. Like, basically, the idea of to really drive in the point that your villain is obviously a villain is this reverse save the cat approach, where instead of having your hero, quote unquote, save a cat early on in the story to demonstrate that they're the hero, you do the reverse. You have them do something irredeemable, whether it's killing an animal or hurting a child, or it could be any number of things that fits the thematic of what you're writing, as long as it's got this irredeemable stamp of approval. One of the things I like to do is play with kind of the dichotomy between creating empathy for the villain, to kind of like Anna was saying, like to make you understand, like always create empathy but never sympathy, so that people understand what the villain is, why he's doing the things he's doing, give him an internal logic that makes the reader sort of question whether or not what he's doing is truly villainous. Basically open the back door to the character and have your readers sneak into the mindset of the villain, and put them in this, perhaps it's because I write horror, but put the reader in this uncomfortable position where not everything is black and white. So you've got this framework where your villain's done something irredeemable, so the reader cannot say, oh, it's fine that he did this thing, but at the same time have to also work with this idea that they understand why things happen the way they happen. And these kind of conflicts, these kind of like this juggling act that you force upon the reader is, I feel, where you get like a lot of meat out of your villains.
Right. Well, and it's kind of backing up on Becca's observation. It's funny, Magneto came up in our superhero episode too, just as this like character that's so complex. We were like, I get where he's coming from. And I think there are like those two types of villains. There's people that like writing villains who are like addicted to power and are evil for the sake of being evil, and those who legitimately believe that what they're doing is kind of an ends justify the means situation. So have you played with both, or it sounds like both of you really like those villains who think they're doing the right thing, or think that the wrong things they're doing are justifiable for their results?
In A God in the Shed, I tried playing with both, in the sense that the original plan was to have sort of the human element be kind of more like that gray area of people that we can understand why they're doing villainous things, and have the titular god just be such an alien presence that they were pure evil in the sense that they don't understand the difference between good and evil. And that was kind of why they were doing the things they did. And the reason behind that is that I have trouble believing, like, no matter how dumb or misguided or ignorant people are, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I am going to do something evil, unless they're sociopaths or psychopaths. So, and even those people probably have some kind of mental gymnastics that they go through to justify to themselves why they're doing it, and usually through narcissism or anything, thinking that they are the only person important. Nobody thinks of themselves as evil. Everybody thinks of themselves as justifiably good. So I needed to create something non-human, and even then it felt too hollow to write it as just purely evil. And I think that this is why we're seeing, if we're going, let's go back to Magneto. This is why Magneto went from kind of more of a stock supervillain back when the X-Men were just a new thing, like classic superhero story, and has grown in complexity and like slid into this gray area, because you can't spend 50 years telling the same story about the same villain without at some point giving him motivations that are more than just getting up in the morning, cackling to oneself, and going off to do evil.
Yeah, absolutely. I think bad writing will be always black and white. I mean, that's just you can recognize bad writing and bad, especially bad character design, that it's purely black and white. Unless maybe, in children's stories where you really want to be moral and teach something, then that's different. But otherwise, black and white is always never a good idea. So the gray zone is very important. I think the gray zone is important for heroes, but it's even more important for villains and anti-heroes. And I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Most villains don't think of them that they are evil, and that's something you can just study really bad guys from history, and you will always find that they thought they're doing good. They always think they are doing the righteous thing, and they're doing the right thing, the necessary thing, in whatever way. The biggest mass murderers, dictators, and so on, none of them was aware that they are evil. They thought they're doing good, and in truth they did evil. And that makes it really, really interesting when villains actually believe they are heroes, and in truth they do horrible things. So that's the gray zone, what was just mentioned, I think. On the other hand, you also can use the ultimate evil. It depends on what genre you're writing, but in some books, in some stories, it actually works well. Like in fantasy, often horror, you can use the ultimate evil. Sometimes, I mean, let's take as example Lord of the Rings. We have been talking about movies, so this is one of the most famous books ever, and we have Sauron, and he is ultimate evil. There is nothing good about this guy, and he knows he's evil. He wants to control and rule everybody, and he wants to destroy, and he knows he's destructive. So this is the ultimate evil guy. So you can have that in certain scenarios. Probably not when you want to write something realistic, but in fantasy it works really well. And I have in my Shadow City series, I have villains who have a lot of different shades to them. Gray zone, they're mostly in the gray zone, but I also have the ultimate evil. They are called the Dark One. They come from another world, they come from another dimension, and they feed on human suffering. So they want humans to suffer as much as they can, because that's basically their food. They get stronger when others suffer. So you can do that. I mean, they are ultimately evil. They know they are evil, and they're totally okay with it. You can do it. It can work, but it doesn't work for every story and every constellation.
That's kind of like my point of view. Like, from their point of view, maybe they know what they're doing is wrong and bad. They need to feed, so they have a motivation. Like, evil, it's not evil for evil's sake.
They still have a need that they're meeting.
Right.
Well, I mean, they also enjoy it. I mean, it's they just want to kill everyone, and I mean, they also, they also torture people, or chop off their heads and play bowling with the heads and stuff like that. So they're really evil, and they have no problem with it. They're like, okay, so we're evil, so what? We will kill everybody anyway. We will win. So that's how they are. But usually that's an exception. Usually I don't write villains like that who are really pure evil. They were just in this story, it was just very fitting because they also come from another world, and I wanted to create creatures who have a completely different mindset than we have. Like, yeah, they basically live in another world. Yeah.
I'm interested. I know that you talked earlier kind of about some of the basic, like, kind of reverse save the cat that you can do to show someone is evil, but how do you kind of avoid some of the villain tropes? And then where in your life do you draw inspiration? Like, have you ever, based characters off of people that you know, or have you ever just like drawn traits from the real world? What does that process of building a villain look like for you?
So I have very often, it's not really villains, it's rather like the little assholes who will die a horrible death. So those people are very often based on people I know, and nobody will ever know it but me, and I'm just having fun with it to do that. But in my first series I wrote, the MUC series, it is available only in German. Actually, this is funny because I based the villain or the antagonist on a guy I knew in real life. And he was really a horrible person, and I totally hated him. And he was mean and whatever. So I took him and basically described him 100%. And then my editor at the publishing house I was with, a big traditional publisher, and she said, well, so I love everything about the story, but we need to work on the villain because he doesn't seem realistic to me. And that was really funny because I just described the guy as he was. Okay, I put him into a dystopian story so he could do more bad things than he could do in real life, but it was too much. I had to make him less evil for the story. So
I had the exact same experience actually. In my first draft that I gave to my editor of On Home, there was like an asshole boyfriend. And it was like all of the comments were like, he is too much of an asshole. He's just a trope of a bad boyfriend. And I was like, yes, exactly. And he was based on an ex. So I had to, I mean, he ended up not in the story at all, but I had to make the person less of an asshole to make the person based on a real person realistic.
I've never really taken any person verbatim as an example, like of a template for a character. What I have done is, if I have a character that's crafted in a certain way and I need in a scene to have a quirk, a behavior, or that they do something, and I remember someone I know having done something that would fit in there, like I may pick up an anecdote, I may pick up a mannerism or something and use those in a certain way, instead of using character like whole cloth people from real life. I have a tendency to deconstruct the people I meet and encounter in my life into their ingredients, and then have these ingredients available when I'm crafting character, when I'm crafting a scene. I've named a character after someone I know, but that was a contest I was running, and it was very clear that that person, I would be using their name on a character that has nothing to do with them, and I would be killing that character. Of all the contests, of all the marketing ploys I've used, this was by far the most successful. People really wanted to die.
It's a very, very nice idea, actually. What I would like to talk about, maybe because that could be helpful for authors who are still starting out and maybe have difficulties writing villains. Maybe we can talk about what you should not do, because there are a lot of traps you can fall into, and then it's difficult to get out of there. So I think there are certain villain tropes which are really cliche, and there is other stuff which is even worse than cliche and you should never do. So I would start with one. And so I think what is horrible and what you should never ever do is that the villain will tell the hero his plan. That's just, the last time that was acceptable was in the 60s when the Bond villains, so Mr. Bond, before I kill you, I will tell you everything I planned, and so on. And then the hero will escape and will. So please don't do that ever. Okay. That was okay in the 60s. It's not okay anymore. Never let your villain tell the story. I mean, show don't tell is definitely important for everything in writing. And it's also important if you want to have the villain do bad things, let him do bad things, let him play out his plan if you want the whole plan to show, but don't let him talk about it. Don't let him explain it. Also, this, so not necessarily tell the plan he wants to do. Don't let him explain why he did it and so on. This has to be clear from his actions and also maybe what dialogues and so on. But never let the villain talk about himself, why he's doing stuff and why not. And the second thing is don't let the villain be stupid. Don't let the hero win over the villain because the villain suddenly becomes stupid and does really stupid mistakes. Make your hero smarter than the villain. Make them outsmart them or stronger physically or whatever, so they can beat them out of their own strengths. But not because the villain suddenly, he's the super villain over 300 pages, and then suddenly at the end he makes a mistake that doesn't fit to the character, so the hero can win. That's sloppy writing. Never do that. There would be 2 things to start with. What not to do.
I don't have a very big list of don'ts. I feel that any author that's self-aware, there's always a way of exploiting a trope, but you need to be aware of it. But that's a different way. Like what you're saying is absolutely true. Like, don't have your villain spill out his guts and tell his plan unless you're aware that you're doing that, where you're part of what you're doing. Either you're doing it for humor or there's some convoluted, clever way you're doing it. I couldn't come up with one, so that's definitely in my lists of don'ts. The one thing I would say is never lose track of what your villain wants. Whatever drives your villain should never, it should never slip from your fingers. It should always be there in the back of your mind to guide your villain's actions. We see that a lot of the time where the villain is relegated to sort of a second importance as far as characters are concerned. He's the villain, so he's there to drive the plot. And because he's there to drive the plot, if at some point I need him to do something villainous for X, Y, Z reason because I needed to move the plot in a certain direction, then I will do it even if it goes against the villain's own best interest, his own motivations, and his own want. And you see that a lot. Like, it's easy to slip that way because as a writer, you want your plot to go in the direction that you've planned, and you're also kind of rooting for your characters to succeed where you want them and fail when you want them. So whenever you're stuck with that situation where you need to have one character act a little bit out of character, go against his own motivations, people have a tendency to go, well, it's the villain, so I can do that because it's the villain. But that just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's very jarring for the reader. So if there's anything I would say you need to avoid is losing track of your villain's motivations. Going back to my initial analogy, if he's the one driving the plot and suddenly he goes from, say, a waltz to a tango, it doesn't work.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. There is only one exception. You can do that if you foreshadow it. I think foreshadowing is like one of the most important writer ingredients. It's extremely important. So you can have your villain change the course and dance a tango at the last third of the book if you have foreshadowed it in a certain way. So whatever it is, that maybe suddenly he will show a soft side you never expected of him.
Or the opposite, you have a careful, meticulous villain that suddenly gets very angry and very impulsive to the hero. If you build up to that as keep showing an increasing anger towards the hero. No, what you're saying is absolutely true. Like the idea of foreshadowing and weaving in reasons for the villain to do it. That's the thing. Like, you're weaving in a different motivation into his initial motivation. I'm not saying that the villain needs to remain static towards the story. It just, whatever he does needs to fit with who he is.
Yeah, it shouldn't be out of the blue, right? Let him be a person. I mean, he's still a person. He is maybe evil, maybe he's horrible, but he's still a person, and love him. That's what I said in the beginning, why I like writing villains. Everybody needs love, even villains do. And I dearly love my villains, especially Metatron and Behind Blue Eyes. He's my boy. I absolutely love him. So he is, we talk to each other and okay, that sounds crazy. I know, but we all
you're talking to 3 other writers. You're fine.
We all do that. We have our characters talk in our head, and so also do that with the villain, even if they are nasty, and even if they do horrible things. And always remember, every horrible thing that comes out of the villain is coming out of you. It's always a part of you. It's always your dark side that will go in there. So play with it and have fun with it, because that's your way to be the dark side. Basically, you have to feel it. The more you feel it, the better it will work, and the more exciting it will be for the readers. So give your villains love, really. Hug them and tell them, good boy, you're doing well.
I would love to know, just for our listeners, if there are any resources or writing craft books or anything that have helped either of you with this topic. I know we mentioned Save the Cat. Has there been anything else that you've kind of turned to build your characters, or to just come up with your villain's arc or anything like that?
So I have a Bible, and that's a story by Robert McKee. It's about screenwriting, but I am originally a screenwriter, so I use a lot of screenwriting techniques when I write novels. And this is a book I can recommend to everybody. It is about screenwriting, but 90% of it you can apply to writing novels. And for me, this book has everything you need about character building, but also about writing scenes and so on. I have my copy, and it really looks bad meanwhile, because I have read it so often or looked up stuff in there. So for me, Robert McKee is really, that's my personal guru. I learned most of my craft from him.
I'm wondering if either of you would like to read a little bit of your work.
We can do that.
Okay.
So we heard a lot about Metatron, the villain of Behind Blue Eyes, and I think this is a scene which shows him pretty well in various ways. So that's why I picked it. His fingers stopped at 2 books, then he turned toward her, watching her closely as he quoted, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." Nephilim was stunned. This was a quote about animals, yet she clearly understood what it meant and why this book was banned in Olympias. A place where everyone was equal, where all burdens of inequality of the past had been eradicated. Race, religion, cultural identity. Yet with a closer look, some people were still more equal than others, superior even. She was unsure what Metatron wanted her to say, what he was thinking by quoting something like this. One wrong word could mean her end. Or was this what he really thought? She turned away from his gaze and studied the book closer instead. George Orwell, Animal Farm. She read the author's name and book title aloud. One of my favorites. Metatron said, and pointed at the second book from the same writer with the cryptic title of 1984. This one is even better. He paused for a second, then quoted, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." "I think I understand why these books are banned," Nephilim said slowly. "Do you? I might let you read them sometime then. Only inside these walls, of course. You will understand I can't lend them to you. Since they aren't being printed anymore, I might never find another copy if they were lost. Of course." Metatron looked her in the eye. "I have one more quote for you. One you might want to remember. If you want to hide a secret, you must also hide it from yourself." He stepped closer and took her face in his hands, stroking it gently. "I hope you enjoyed dinner, my sweet, intelligent Nephilim," he said softly, "because now it's time for me to enjoy dessert. I'm sure you know that." He came even closer, and for a moment it seemed he would kiss her. Suddenly, he grabbed her by the shoulders and smashed her against the wall between 2 bookshelves with such speed and force that the shelves shook, and the walls suffered deep marks from the impact of Nephilim's titanium bones. Before she could react, he was on her, pressing her against the wall. Nephilim hardly believed what was happening here. She was strong and fast, superior to any human and most other angels, but he was much stronger and faster. Whatever augmentations Metatron was wearing, they were much better than anything she had. she wouldn't stand a chance against him.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna.
I have a passage, but it is the passage with the cat, so I don't know if that's what you guys want on your podcast. Otherwise, I might need to dig a little deeper.
I think it might be great for readers to have, or for listeners to have an example, since we've been talking about that.
All right, well, trigger warning. It was the twitching that got her most. Venus had been staring, paralyzed into the tall, unkempt lawn of her backyard. Seconds, perhaps hours had passed since she stood motionless, her fingers shaking, unconsciously mimicking the jerking motions of her cat's back leg. Sherbet was dead. He had to be. The unfortunate creature was lying on the damp ground, drops of dew surrounding his body like glittering jewels. At first glance, she didn't recognize him. His smoky black coat of long, soft fur had been removed. In fact, every bit of skin had been flayed from his body, leaving the cat a mass of glistening red sinew and muscles. His ears had been torn off, his eyelids and whiskers removed. His tail, a glorious feather duster that he'd so proudly swayed as he'd walked through the house, had been reduced to a bony rope of pink and red strands. The only thing left to identify her pet was the nylon collar around his neck. Whatever had murdered and mutilated the animal wanted to make sure he was recognized when found. It wanted Venus to know what she was seeing. His back leg kept twitching, a tiny back and forth motion that was probably caused by some death reflex. Venus knew that. Any number of post-mortem bodily functions could occur. Gasps, coughing, spasms in the extremities as rigor mortis set in. Despite that academic knowledge, the twitching punched at her heart with every movement. Eyes wide and unblinking, her vision blurred by tears, Venus crouched down to inspect her flayed cat. His big green eyes seemed to be staring at her, plaintive and confused. She observed his tiny chest, glad to see he wasn't breathing. She reached out, fingers shaking, to touch Sherbet's neck. She held her breath for God knows how long, and sighed in relief when she found no pulse. Venus looked up. She had a vivid awareness of her surroundings. The low hum of a distant lawnmower, the smell of morning humidity, the wet dew on her knees. All of it cut through the haze of her distress to remind her exactly where she was. Her eyes settled on the backyard shed, looming only a few feet away. Scottish blood from 3 generations past boiled in her veins. Her beloved but dim-witted pet had been attracted to the shed, probably by the smell of the birds that had perished inside. There he had met his fate, at the hands of a monsters made of shadows and blood.
Awesome. Yeah, there's no coming back from that as a villain. Anna, do you want to tell us where to find you online?
I'm on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, and I have a website. And of course, I have my books on Amazon. I would love to connect. So if someone wants to say hi, do that. Twitter is always a very good way to do that, or simply subscribe to my newsletter. It comes with a free short story in my cyberpunk universe. So if you go on my website, you can subscribe to my newsletter there, and it's the easiest way to be in touch with me. Simply reply to any of my emails, and I will reply back. So yeah.
And we'll go ahead and put links to all of that, so it'll be easier to find you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is a little bit complicated to write, so if I just say look for my name, look for Anna Mocikat. Okay, I'm the only one with the name, but still, it's easy to write it wrong. So better with a link.
I know the feeling.
And JF, where can people find you?
Anywhere that you search for JF Dubeau, that's JF Dubeau, you'll either find my website at jfdubeau.com, and then you can find links to all my social media. Or if you search for my name, just in Google or in most social media, you'll find me there. The one thing I do want to bring attention to, if you don't mind me plugging something,
No, go for it.
If you want some much lighter horror, what we like to call cozy horror, with absolutely zero animal cruelty, you can listen to my podcast Achewillow. It's a cozy horror podcast. It's narrated by my friend Amy Frost, who's just an absolute genius narrator and voiceover artist. And we've got 3 seasons out. I tend to think it's very enjoyable, and it's a good way to have a soft introduction to the kind of horror I like to write.
That's great. We'll put a link to that as well in the show notes.
Well, thank you.
Oh, well, thank you both so much. This was a pleasure. I think this is going to be a really fun episode for everyone.
I wanted to say thank you for inviting me. I had a blast with you. It was very, very interesting. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
This was a lot of fun. It was great to meet you, Anna, and I'll make sure to check out your books.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Writer Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will subscribe to hear our future episodes. We want to thank the Writing Block community for the continued support. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, or at writingblock.com, no K. Remember to subscribe, share, and tell your friends. Thanks, everyone, and happy writing.